I was living in a hotel, since torn down, a kind of residence, about 2 or 3 blocks north of the White House on 16th Street. And I didn't know anything about going into the White House except as a visitor or something. So I got dressed that Sunday evening, walked down 16th Street to the White House, wearing my hat. We wore hats in those days. Wearing my good suit, which was my only suit I had at that time. I was still making $25 a week, even though I would then work for the network. So I walked right into the front door, went up through the gate. Nobody was at the gate, no policeman or anything like that. And I walked through the gates and up the driveway to the front door and knocked on the door. And the door was opened by a black butler, one of the several, or maybe he was a footman. I guess he was a footman. And impressive fellows, big, tall, dignified, youngish, but full of a marvelous dignity, you know. And I said, I'm here to do the broadcast. And he asked somebody over his shoulder, and they said, send him in. And I walked right into the front door. We weren't supposed to do that, obviously. We never did it again. And I walked through the White House, and there was a big staircase, I think, in the back there at the rear. And I was taken up the staircase to a landing, walked along the landing to a room. And on the landing were still big crates marked from Hyde Park to the White House, Washington, D.C. They were still moving in, you see. And where I was going was, I'm pretty sure it was the Lincoln study or the Lincoln Library. I couldn't swear to that anymore, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Well, there had been lots of publicity, of course, about the incoming president-elect before the inauguration. And one thing that was written about him was that he had a political advisor, a sort of genius who had been with him for years and years. They were very intimate. His name was Lewis McHenry Howe.
Right.
And when I walked into the room, there was a sofa there, and the president was on the sofa with Mr. Howe. They're both together on the sofa, engrossed in conversation. Didn't pay any attention to us. I walked, around the sofa and went over to a little table, like a card table, that the engineers had set up in advance for the place for the president to make his speech, to make the talk when it was time for him to give the talk. And, made myself busy if I could, doing anything I could do. And the two gentlemen talked for a while until it got fairly close to time. And we said, it's time now, Mr. President. Incidentally, they were already ship's models along decorating the study. I mean, the president had unpacked the ship's models anyway. It was true that they really were a favorite object of his. So Mr. Howe got up, made himself scarce, and this is the first time I'd been close to the president, and the first time I saw the braces in operation. And he put his leg out straight, and he pushed on the knee, and there was a click, and then it was firm out like that. First one leg, and then the other, and he had to get up backward and holding on to the sofa a little bit. And then he had a walking stick, and then somebody, it might have been Mr. Howe, offered an arm, and with one hand for balance on the arm and the other with the stick, he'd swing the legs, which were otherwise immobile, just from the hip there was motion. And in that way he proceeded over to the little table on the side and undid the braces again and sat down. And that's how I saw him for the first time walking. So he was very much interested in everything. He had been known to be very friendly to radio in his days as governor of New York before he was elected president, that he'd brought radio along and done a lot with it and for it. So at those days, NBC had microphone signs that said NBC. CBS, which was then called the Columbia Broadcasting System, and CBS wasn't being used yet by the corporation, they had on their mic signs Columbia, like that. Well, the result was that when the newspapers printed the photographs, nobody could read these tiny letters Columbia, and everybody saw NBC. And the whole purpose was to get your call letters in the newspaper.
Right.
So CBS was just making a switch, and they had the brand new little mic sign that said CBS. And as soon as the president sat down, he said, "What's CBS?" He hadn't seen that before. He wanted to know, and we talked a little bit, chatted, and he was interested in all sorts of things about the radio. And we had a little conversation, And then it was time for him to, time was getting very close, so they wanted to get his copy of the speech. And the rest of us all had mimeographed copies. Mimeograph was something that came along and is now dead as a way of reproduction. And I hate to say this against the company if they're still around, but it was pretty bad. The letters didn't come out as well as a typewriter with a clear impression of a whole letter. There were parts of letters. And it was pretty hard to read unless you had plenty of time to go over it with a pencil. Well, the reason I mention this is they never did find Mr. Roosevelt's copy that he prepared to read, his own copy. And he had to borrow a mimeographed copy, which must have been terrible to read. But he did it perfectly. He did the first Fireside Chat from a mimeographed copy. And to jump ahead for a little bit, his own copy was later discovered in his bed where he'd been reading it and forgotten left it there, his original copy.